Welcome back, everybody. Been a little while since I did a video, but we're finally here to talk about my favorite games once again. This is part of the follow-up to the top 50 that I did not too long ago. And this time I'm going to be nitpicking my favorite games. The reason why is because back then I didn't want to focus on the negatives, and this is the opportunity now where I can give some honest, unbiased opinion about those games. Now, everything that you're going to see on this list, I consider a 9 or a 10 out of 10 certified masterpiece, right? From the first time that I played these games, way back when, whenever it was, these are the same opinions that I've maintained for so many years, decades in some instances. I think that the games held up, or still hold up so well, and there's no need for me to go nuts over here and bombard them with a whole bunch of modern day tweaks and modern day quality of life changes. They didn't need them back then, and a lot of these games don't need them today. What I'm trying to look at in an unbiased way and without a lot of kind of modern day creativity and invention is what about the games back then in their original states? Could they have done a little bit better? What were the things that I didn't like about the games when I played them? And I'll give you a heads up right now. I'm not going to knock your socks off with anything so constructive, so critical, or anything that's going to change the game entirely because, well, the games wouldn't be masterpieces in my opinion if I found so many flaws with them to begin with. So a lot of the things I'm going to be criticizing and nitpicking might seem a little bit frivolous. That said, I'm still going to make this entertaining and, I don't know, hopefully informative, at least very interesting for all of you. Time to begin. And the first game was number 15 on my top 50. Metroid Prime, and this was the first 10 out of 10 game to appear on my list. Now, how is it that a 10 out of 10 game only ranks 15th out of 50? It's funny, Metroid Prime, I think a lot of people include it in their best games of all time, but for some reason it has a lot of trouble breaking into the top 5, and I'm thinking, why is that? 10 out of 10, it's a perfect game, so what could it stand to improve on? I think it's this. It just needs one more element to push it over the top. And I guess this doesn't even count as a criticism. I don't know, interpret it however you want to. But it needs one more element to really push it into the top, to make it universally known as like one of the best games ever that everyone has to play. Side quests. And I think the best way to implement side quests in Metroid Prime is a way that capitalizes on one of its best aspects, and that is the exploration. You don't want side quests that are going to detract from seeing the different planet. I was going to say planets there, that's why it sounds so weird. You don't want side quests that are going to detract from that. You want side quests that are going to be properly integrated in your exploration. So I think a great way to model them is like Subnautica. In Subnautica, from what I remember anyways, and we'll see if the footage proves if my memory is correct, is you would often receive these distress calls and some signals and different little messages and little PDAs that were left around, and you would follow those signals to life rafts and things of that nature. When you would explore them and uncover them, you'd get some new storyline, not part of the main storyline necessarily, just a little bit of extra content, extra lore, and some information on what's going on. But you can take that wherever you want, or the developers can take that wherever they want to. I just think that you can seamlessly integrate a few more story or lore-based side quests. They don't have to have massive rewards. All Metroid players are satisfied if it's just 1% in their completion rate as they head towards 100%. And that would probably take the game from being 10 out of 10 to 11 out of 10. I think so anyways. I don't want to change the core game. Metroid Prime is amazing, but it's missing a little something, isn't it? So that's game number 1. Again, this is why it's nitpicking. These aren't things that I find bad or things that I dislike about the games, because there is nothing to dislike there. Maybe it's just the absence of something even better. Now, game number 2, Age of Empires 2, and we're going with Definitive Edition because that is the king of Age of Empires 2. This one I've got some real criticisms for. And the first one is that it sometimes feels like the civilizations are not distinguished or unique enough. You look at a lot of the team bonuses, and that's somewhere that would be fun to focus on. Team bonuses really ought to bring something new to the table. Every civilization should have its own unique team bonus, so that when you play a team game, even if it's just AI, you can craft these really intricate teams with some really unique bonuses and boons. Another thing I think, and this is probably the biggest criticism of the game, and yet it still plays phenomenally even without this, we need more, or I don't know if we need them. Anyways, don't worry about my phrasing or my words too much here. But more height advantages, something that I feel is never fully realized in the game. So a game like StarCraft does a really good job of implementing height advantages and disadvantages because there's fog of war. For example, if you've ever tried to attack a Terran base and there's a siege tank up there, you can't see it, but it can see you. And so it keeps on firing out of the fog of war and it's just obliterating your army. We don't need fog of war in Age of Empires 2. I think a couple things that would be much simpler and that would work seamlessly in the game are decreased movement speed when your army's heading uphill. And another one here, I think, reduced line of sight. So if you've got a footman, and this number is probably wrong, but let's just say it can see 6 tiles ahead, maybe when it's going uphill, it can only see 4 tiles ahead. All right. Next game, Halo 3. I don't have much to say about Halo 3. I just think that the game could use better balancing on legendary difficulty. And I thought about this for a while. I was trying to come up with an actual solution to this because it's not enough for me to simply criticize the game and not have a proposed solution. I got to think of something. So here's the best idea that I came up with. The enemies on Legendary should have different and better movement. For example, if you're facing an elite, it's pretty predictable what it does, and you can usually bait elites to do what you want them. You shoot at the head, they kind of duck and swerve and get out of the way. You throw a grenade, they dive out of the way. What if on Legendary, the enemies can start to emulate human movement a little bit? They can take more random paths. They can run in diagonals and semicircles and things of that nature. Rather than just making them deal more damage, because Legendary honestly isn't that fun. The best balanced enemies are on Heroic difficulty, I find. Keep the Heroic damage and then just increase their movement, their patterns a little bit for Legendary. And that would make Halo 3 such a great game to play on those higher difficulties. And it would still be a lot of fun for co-op too, right? You and your ally are against these enemies that are seemingly reacting like humans, like AI. That'd be great. Next game here, Dota 2. I'll keep it really short and sweet for Dota 2. Get rid of the new map and revert the newest changes. I have been on and off with this game. Some of you know that this game consumed 8 years of my life, or it's more accurate to say that I gave it 8 years of my life, right? I need some accountability. But then I got back into it after having some time off, and I was enjoying around the start of this channel, playing it every now and then with my friends. And this new update dropped around the end of April of this year, and it just killed my enthusiasm for the game. So unfortunately, it's still, a great game, but it's just wearing this face of makeup that I can't stand right now, and I don't want anything to do with it. Another thing they could do, rework the neutral items. I was never a fan of them. I thought the randomness just didn't really suit Dota, and I know that sounds silly to say, but without me spending too much time on it, just take it from somebody who has spent thousands of hours with the game and who once upon a time was actually very, very good at the game. It doesn't need that sort of randomness with the neutral items. So Dota 2, that's it for now. The next game, Minecraft. Yeah, now I've got some more to say. Now I can be a little more critical. Some of the achievements are just too hard to unlock. Plain and simple. Ridiculously hard to unlock, actually. The steps that they make you go through. And also, on the topic of achievements, there could be a few more in there. Some of the achievements are really basic and they only have a few requirements involved. And then the next achievement that's in that same little achievement line requires 10 times more things to do, 10 times more steps. And some of the knowledge that's required to complete the achievement is almost esoteric, right? It's just like, oh, who's supposed to know that? That makes no sense to the average player. So achievements need a lot of work. Speaking of knowledge, unfortunately, it feels to me like guides are mandatory to get the best experience out of Minecraft. And I don't think that should be the case with any game, or at least most games. Now, Minecraft still has so many ways that you can play it and enjoy it and just kind of load it up freely and just play liberally and not really care about what's going on or what's being done perfectly. But at the very least, to get the most out of your experience, And really, this is going to enhance your experience if you do things properly. You need guides, and I don't think that's good game design. How could they fix that? Maybe just more internal guidance would be a good solution, rather than making people have to play with a second window with the Wikipedia page. And the last point here for Minecraft, survival mode is long and arduous, and getting great gear, enchanting it, and progressing to the end and beyond, it just feels too time consuming. And again, that's not going to be a problem for your average Minecraft player, because they love sinking dozens and hundreds of hours into the game. And I was one of those people for a long time, and I'm still one of those people at least once a year when I feel like firing the game up again. But something's got to change there as well, where it's just a little more streamlined and it's a little bit easier maybe in some modes. Maybe there could be an EXP booster. Maybe there already is and I'm not even aware of it. Anyways, not going to focus too much on that. Next up, The Witcher 3. And this is one of the best games I've ever played. So I don't have too much to say about it. A lot of my complaints here are actually pretty funny. Number one is, why did they remove the traps from The Witcher 2? I thought traps were so cool. And then you get to Witcher 3 and you got your bombs, you've got your magics and your flasks and all of that good stuff. Flasks. But where are the traps? Why can't you lay those out anymore? They would have added so much more to hunting and enemy encounters, to all kinds of situations. So bring back traps, please, in The Witcher 4. Next point, the Scoia'tael, which for those of you who are unaware, they are an elven and combined faction of sorts. They're basically the oppressed faction, although it's not as clear-cut as that. They've got some bad actors in that group as well, just like real life. Whoa. Scoia'tael ought to have had a bigger role. I don't know if the writers and developers ran out of time for implementing them properly, but it is what it is. And then finally, one of my biggest gripes with The Witcher 3 is Triss had a better design in The Witcher 2. Yep. I did not think she looked as good in The Witcher 3. What is that all about? All right. Gladius. If you don't know Gladius, if this game doesn't ring a bell to you, go check it out in my top 5 of the top 50. All right? A little spoiler in this video, but Gladius is nested nicely in my top 5 of all time. It's a great game with gladiators and tactical turn-based combat. You're going to love it. I don't know if turn-based is the right description, but whatever. You do take turns in it. Anyways, I think the skills could be balanced a little bit better, so you have more incentive to have a wide array of skills. I find when I play the game, I'm always looking at the same skills time and time again, just because they seem better, or at least they're more suited to my play style, which is on the button inputs and on getting combos correctly, kind of like Paper Mario combos with the buttons that you press on screen. Some of the skills just never feel like they're worth getting. Next point is, there needs to be a bigger maximum school size. So the way the game works is you have your gladiator school, and think of Final Fantasy Tactics here. Imagine if you could only have 20 characters in your party. Maybe in a game like that, it seems like a fair number of characters, but in Gladius, not enough. You have unique characters, and then you have 16 other slots, I believe, by the end of the game. And there's about 30 different unit types in the game for you to choose from. So really, just to have some variety, you can only pick about half of the unit types. If you wanted to have a really interesting party, a unique party to deploy with 2 wolves or 2 bears or doubling up on anything or 4 of something, that's going to consume a quarter of your roster size. So maybe someone's worked on that with mods for replaying it, but making this video, I'm not thinking about what mods can bestow on the player. Next game, Tales of Symphonia. And I had to refresh my memory a little bit here and watch a few cutscenes on YouTube for the game, but nothing changes here. Tales of Symphonia, one unfortunate thing is that multiple playthroughs are required to experience everything. You got some different endings, different relationships you can form, different characters that can be in the party. It's not necessarily a bad thing. I think it's one of the things that people appreciate about RPGs and JRPGs is that every time you play, there are going to be significant differences, including the main story. So take that as you will. Maybe it's good, maybe it's not. And then the other point here is that other versions of the game have more goodies. I played it on the GameCube. I played the original English release. And while I don't feel like I missed out, and this is kind of, in retrospect I'm thinking about it, Other versions have it a little bit better. That's not really fair. But anyways, Tales of Symphonia, one of my favorite games of all time. Obviously, all these games are. But one of the best games that I've ever played. So it's hard to point out anything negative with the game. I love it. Now, I've got a cluster of 3 games here. I'm going to talk about Mario games, or Mario games. All right. When Mario says it, by the way, it's a me Mario, okay? I say it a little bit closer to that, I suppose. I know Peach says Mario, but anyway, that's something to argue about another time. The first Mario game is Paper Mario. And this is virtually a perfect game. Paper Mario 64, not Thousand Year Door. Not going to talk about that game here, because I like this one better. So it's virtually a perfect game, but if you wanted to improve anything, you could be inspired by Thousand Year Door, and the partners could have their own HP. That'd be pretty nice. And maybe you can even include the deflections and parries that Mario is able to perform against enemies, just to add a little more variety to the combat. Although I don't think it needs it, it would objectively make it better. The other thing, Wacka's Bump is the only example of a finite item, but there's some other items here that I once thought were finite. Just turns out, after doing a little bit of research, they are incredibly difficult to obtain over and over again. So the Ultra Shrooms, Ultra Shrooms and Jam and Jellies, sure, you can get multiple of those during your playthrough, different parts of the map, and also you can get an unlimited number in Toad Town. That is a ridiculous mini game that might cost you 110 coins per item, and it's going to be random unless you implement glitches. Would I implement the glitches? Of course. And the last point here for Paper Mario, the items could stack, right? So that you could afford more in your inventory. Because currently the way it works is you've got a mushroom occupies one spot. Another mushroom is going to occupy another spot, etc., etc. And you can only hold 10 items at a time. The shops have a storage, and I believe the storage there is also limited. So just give us unlimited storage, please. Then you don't have to sell and throw out your items. Or at least increase it so that, you know, you're a little bit less of a hoarder when it comes to managing your stuff. The next Mario game is Super Mario Bros. 3. Oh yeah, this is one of my favorites. This is going to go down for the rest of my life as one of the best games of all time. So, at the time, and for as many as 2 decades, this game was perfect the way it was. Once again, though, we've seen new blocks, new teleportation devices, and all kinds of cool things implemented in the games. I know I said I didn't want to do a lot of hindsight or revisionist history and biased thinking about these games, but if I look at a game that I think, well, it's pretty much perfect the way it is, I have to have a little bit of mind to think, well, how could it be better made today? But I don't want changes. I love the graphics. I love all those things. Anyways, here's a serious point, though. More ways to acquire rare power-ups. I'm talking the hammerhead suit, the frog suit, the music note, things of that nature that were rare in your playthrough or uncommon. And maybe to make those items a little more impactful or interesting, they could implement some puzzle type things, some different uses for the items. For example, if you have the Hammer Brother, well, I guess there already are blocks that break to the Hammer Brother, right? Aren't they shaped like feet on the map? Anyways, more stuff of that nature is always appreciated. And then finally, the last point here, I'm really nitpicking with this game. Minor cosmetic changes could help differentiate some of the worlds and the airships. Actually, the worlds are great, but the castles and the airships, and maybe a world like World 8 could have a little more done on it, some more doodads, some more something. Felt a little bit rushed, World 8. Not sure if that's true or not, but that's how it felt when I played the game. Next and final Mario game, Super Mario Maker 2. So, could there always be more features, more blocks, more tools, more enemy types, all that stuff? Of course there could be, but I don't feel like the game necessarily needs anything. Now, it's been a while since I played the game. It's been a while since I made anything in the game. But in all of the hours that I spent with it, I was always pleased with the selection. And I felt like if I wasn't able to build something, it was usually a skill issue and not a problem with the game itself. That said, you know, we could use some slightly larger maps because I have reached the maximum build size before. We could use more warp pipes. Those are actually limited when you try to make a map. You're not able to use, for example, more than 8 I don't think. I probably have that number wrong. And how about fitting more assets on the screen? Because I know some designers have run out before, just trying to decorate the map and do other things of that nature. You can run out a little sooner than you might expect. I think those would be some reasonable improvements. Next point is it would be great to have multiple multiple game styles, right? Super Mario Bros. 1, 2, 3 on the same map. Currently, you have to stick with one game style per map. At least I'm pretty sure that's how I left the game when I last played it. It was one game style per map. So being able to take a warp pipe and all of a sudden you have different graphics, that would be incredible. And then finally, while it's not a fault of the game itself, this fault and blame lies with Nintendo. I can't stand that the online subscription is behind a paywall. So I feel like I'm missing out on a lot of features and I'm missing out on a lot of the cool playtime and things that I could do because I don't want to pay. I do not want to enable that kind of service. Again, not really a fault of the game. The game itself is wonderful as it is. Now, for the next group of games, we got From Software. So Dark Souls for number 1. Yes, Dark Souls 1. I like this game better than 3. The first problem with it is that you cannot specialize. You cannot re-specialize your stats or your build. Once you play something and you've invested the hours into it, you got to live with it. You can't take your stats away out of the build. If you've got 15 in dex and all of a sudden you decide, oh no, why didn't I put some points in intelligence or faith? Too bad. You got to live with that. The other thing is some content is missable. Now, it's a problem for me. It's not necessarily a problem for you. That's why this is my list. But I don't like the feeling of missing a storyline or this or that. And this ties into the next point, which is to 100% the game, you need multiple playthroughs. Now, I loved the game. And I loved that I was a little more overpowered the next time I played it. And the next time, and I think the 4th time around, I got to 4 kings, and I was like, okay, this is just miserable now. Too much health. But, 100% getting all the content, you need multiple playthroughs. Again, is that a bad thing, or is that just a feature of the game? Is that the genre's game design? Well, maybe even if it is the genre's game design, and one of the stylistic choices of these genres, it's not necessarily a bad thing. Just because it's the way that it's always been doesn't mean it's good. But you guys can debate that in the comments. And finally, a real critique of the game is that storytelling is a weak point. Now in Dark Souls 1, that wasn't the biggest bother for me because the gameplay was so good, exploration was on another level, and the world was just so spectacular. But when I talk about the next game here, Elden Ring, that storytelling being weak still is an issue. I feel like, Elden Ring was 2022, right? So the storytelling should have been improved upon, especially with George R.R. Martin writing the story or whatever he did. Nothing against the guy, but there's all this hype about the story and the collaboration. The way that they told the story, the way that you received information of the game, needed to be so much more than what it was. And having to read the items again for a lot of the lore descriptions and things of that nature, it just didn't cut it. Again, I loved playing the game, but they did not necessarily hook me and get me engrossed the way that they could have. The next thing is, again, like Dark Souls, 100% requires multiple playthroughs. Now, in Elden Ring, you can do this with some save scumming, and you can make a copy of your save, and you could do one ending, and then the next, and you can actually get 100% with one file, with one save. You don't have to replay it. So, but if you want to do it legitimately, I'd imagine it's fairly tedious, right? I mean, again, you're overpowered, and in Elden Ring, being overpowered is even more fun, but it depends on your enjoyment from your first playthrough. Next point, as always, there's missable content. Just talked about that, though. And then finally, Elden Ring specifically, I feel like the exploration was not always rewarding enough. Actually, it usually was not rewarding enough. And there's memes online about how, everything's a mushroom. Oh my god, it's another mushroom. I went all the way over here, and what'd they give me? A mushroom. Usually nothing, though. And I wish that the game, with all of the beauty in the open world and all the cool platforming and tricks and jumps that you can do, there would be more stuff out of the way, or at least more variety in the loot that you can get. I felt like that was a little disappointing because it made me actually stop exploring the way that I did. When I first started playing the game, I was climbing up on this column and I was trying to jump over an arch and get over here and move over there. This secret area, is it a secret? It turns out no. There actually were not as many secrets in the game as I thought, at least not via exploration. There's tons of secret with different characters and things of that nature, but just not a lot that you really get to on foot. All right, next series of games, Pokemon. First game here, Pokemon Puzzle League. This is a weird one. There is a persistent timer running in the puzzle section of the game. So little puzzles like solve this in 3 moves or less, solve this in 4 moves. For whatever reason, even when you click to replay a puzzle, you've already beaten it. The timer is still running. Why is that not a timer that just does your best time on that puzzle? I don't know. It's a little unusual. Maybe you can reset it. Didn't really care to explore it for this video. Next point, more can be done with the different Pokemon available. So Ash's team, for example, is Pikachu, Bulbasaur, and Squirtle. I'm pretty sure. I don't have the game in front of me right now. I haven't played in a few weeks either. But I think it's Pikachu, Bulbasaur, and Squirtle. And it's just for cosmetic purposes. And the audio changes as well, and that's really cool to hear the different Pokemon cries. But couldn't they have gone next level? Maybe implemented a special mode where your different Pokemon could actually have different abilities that impact the game board in some way. And then building off of that with different Pokemon, you know, the motto since I was a kid, I know it's no longer the case, but it used to be, gotta catch 'em all. So couldn't there have been ways to obtain different Pokemon through the different modes in the game? And then Ash could maybe also use Charmander, or Ash could use Tauros, or a Pokemon like that. And again, Tauros would maybe have an ability that you could use in a certain game mode, and it would affect the board in some way. Just some different ideas. This game is my favorite puzzle game of all time. Certainly my favorite competitive puzzle game. So nothing needs to change in the gameplay. Those are just some ideas I had. The second Pokemon game is Pokémon Emerald. And again, this game to me is virtually perfect. Obviously, it would still benefit from some of the quality of life changes that we've seen in the modern games, but I don't think they're all necessary. For me, the only one that I would implement, or that I would have done differently during Emerald's time, is having not infinite TMs, right? Have infinite TMs. They can be usable, right? One-time use each TM, but have a way of obtaining every TM multiple times during your playthrough, so you don't have to trade through your game through other games, so you don't have to restart your game or anything like that. Now, it wasn't exactly a problem for me as a teenager or as a kid because I had a cloning method, and so I think the way I would do it is I would just equip an item, equip a TM or a rare candy or Master Ball to my Pokemon, go to the box, clone it. Now I've got 2 of that Pokemon and 2 of that item. Maybe there's a different method and I can't remember it now. Wasn't a problem for me as a kid, but that's not necessarily right. That doesn't absolve it from being a problem in the game. The next point, trade-only Pokemon. These things, if they're not going to be abolished, then the way that you can obtain them at least needs to be available in a solo playthrough. There have to be some NPCs who will let you trade and trade back your Pokemon because you just want to evolve your Graveler into a Golem or your Haunter into a Gengar. You know, the older I get, the more this bothers me. This is not just an Emerald problem. Back then, it wasn't the worst thing either because I had Ruby and Sapphire and 2 Game Boys, and if I wasn't going to trade with my friend, then I could trade with myself. But that's absurd. Why should a player, if they're going to play the game on their own, have 2 pieces of the hardware to obtain certain Pokemon? It's just far too unreasonable, to put it nicely. Next point here, some Hoenn Pokemon, including Masquerain, Medicham, and Zangoose, are not available in Emerald. I didn't even realize this was a thing until doing some research for this video. And the fact that you had Pokemon in Ruby and Sapphire who then were no longer available in Emerald is just a very bizarre design choice for me. I mean, yeah, you could trade them into the game, but that's not good enough. No way. Next, some Pokemon, like Deoxys in Emerald, should have been available in-game again. Not just as an event-only Pokemon, like how I complained about the trades, Make it possible to obtain the Pokemon in a solo playthrough. I shouldn't need to do Mystery Gift. I shouldn't need to go to the Pokemon Center in New York City to be able to get this version's legendary Pokemon. Again, an unreasonable ask. Next point, I've got a lot for Pokemon, boy. And I'm telling you, this is a 10 out of 10 game. I love Emerald. I could replay it every day of the week. But the water-type champion, Wallace, that was disappointing. I mean, all these generations... Okay, I guess this is only Generation 3. But champions with a wide variety of Pokemon on their teams at different types. And then all of a sudden, you get Wallace, and he's water types only. And I know he's got Ludicolo, grass, water. He's got Barboach, grass... No, sorry, I'm misspeaking. Ground and water. That's not good enough for me, though. Wallace at least had a somewhat interesting story, but not good enough. And then finally, some of the teams are just stupid. Like some of the Elite Four members. Phoebe, I think, is the ghost-type trainer's name, and she has 2 Bannettes and 2 Dusclops. And then Drake, the dragon trainer, I think he has something like 2 Dragonairs and 2 Dragonites. It's something really bizarre. 2 Shelgons and 2 of something else. What are they thinking with that? For the Elite Four battles? Are you kidding me? Now, maybe the teams change when you rematch them. I can't remember. Doesn't matter. We're moving on to the next and final series, The Legend of Zelda. Yes, saving the best for last. All right, so Majora's Mask. Fierce Deity does not get enough usage. I think at this point I can talk about Fierce Deity because a lot of you have seen who that is and what that is in Tears of the Kingdom. It was the big secret in Majora's Mask. And really, it only got usage in boss fights. And for most players, that was only going to be the final boss fight. Although that wasn't even going to be for most players, because most players probably did not have all masks, which is how you got to obtain the Fierce Deity mask. Anyway, none of that stuff is a problem with me. Just that you should have been able to use him in more areas in more ways. And then finally, some other masks unfortunately share the same fate. Where, the Brennan mask, which is the one that lets you march and has the cuckoos following you, the little chicks. Maybe that could have had usage in some other parts of the game. And I can't think of any others right now, but more applications for some of those lesser masks would have been really cool. I don't really have anything to complain about with this game. I didn't mind the time cycle. I didn't mind the puzzles or anything like that. I thought they were all brilliant. I love Majora's Mask. And before Tears of the Kingdom, it was my favorite Zelda game. Next, Breath of the Wild. So we're getting there. One of the games that you all want to hear about. We're getting there. But first, Breath of the Wild. It felt like the game was lacking in NPCs, side quests, and the world just could have had a little more going on in it. There could have been a little more life in the world. It wasn't the biggest problem, wasn't the big detractor when I first played the game, but I did think it when I first played the game, don't get me wrong. It became even more evident, though, when I played Tears of the Kingdom. So thank God, a lot of the things that I'm going to say here for Breath of the Wild, they have been improved upon for Tears of the Kingdom. Next point, and this is my real gripe with the game. I kid you not, this is actually what bothers me the most. There needed to be a recipe book. How is it that Link has this cool Sheikah technology and somehow it doubles as a photo album, but not a recipe book? Or could Zelda... Okay, well... No, Zelda, they could have worked it in with her story. Even the old man could have given Link, here's a notebook. Write your recipes down in this, Link. And he'd just be like, what? Okay, fine. I've gotten weirder items in other Zelda games. So that was one of the reasons and one of the things that made me not approach and dive into cooking as much as I could have in Breath of the Wild. It was just like, well, what the heck am I making? I don't remember what I made in my first hour of the game. I have seen this item before. I have seen this recipe before. Anyways. Not the best explanation, just venting a little bit. They needed a recipe book. Thankfully, we kind of got one in Tears of the Kingdom. Tears of the Kingdom is actually pretty unique with their recipes. Finally, the last point, Master Mode needed some work. It was mostly for bragging rights. I feel like the changes it made to the game were not significant enough. Turning gold enemies into damage sponges, that doesn't cut it. That is not the right way to make a game harder. There could have been more variety in the enemy camps, or maybe don't even worry about making the game that much harder. Just scale the gold enemies up appropriately, right, from the silver enemies, and leave it like that. Add another enemy per camp. What they did add in Master Mode, though, with the floating encampments, and those had treasure chests, those were really cool. So Master Mode wasn't all bad, and my true file, my true playthrough, that is as close to 100% as I could get it, that is in Master Mode, so I do like it, but there was room for improvement for sure. And I've said it before, I hope they don't do that for Tears of the Kingdom. Now, speaking of Tears of the Kingdom, here we go with the final game of the video. I think this is a pretty long video so far. I feel like I've been talking for a long time. Point number 1. There was no filter so that you could see different stamps on your map screens. I'm someone who uses stamps like crazy. Korok stamps, cooking pot, the gem, and all those other icons. I just litter my map with that. So imagine how much more beneficial it would be to the player if you could filter by stamp and maybe some other things when you look at your maps, just so that it wouldn't be as cluttered and you could find what you need to find a little more quickly. The next point, the metal block puzzles, the Korok ones, it felt like they were simplified compared to Breath of the Wild. Everything else, they swung it out of the park, and I love the additions of the new Korok puzzles. But why, for some of my favorites with those metal block puzzles, did they just feel a little too rushed, a little too easy? Usually you would pick up a piece, you'd rotate it 2 times, and it would fit the same way that you were looking. There were very few, at least I have about half the Koroks, and this is how it feels to me. It feels like there are too few puzzles where you fetch the metal block from some far off location, have to think of a clever way to transport it, and then you have to really rack your brain for manipulating it. Maybe there could have even been some puzzles with multiple metal blocks. That would have been good. All right, and finally, the last complaint for Tears of the Kingdom. I'm telling you, these are not that significant. These are some phenomenal games. But there could have been differences in the abilities granted from your clothing and the abilities granted through cooking and elixirs. Because what I found, the more I played the game and the more I buffed up my equipment, or whatever, I just, found other ways to navigate the world, is I often didn't need food and elixir buffs. If I wanted cold protection, it was on some of my gear. If I wanted an attack buff, well, I would just switch to barbarian armor or something like that. And I know a lot of players, they do double up and they use unique buffs on both pieces or on their food and their equipment. But I just feel like had there been separate categories and there's a unique set of buffs for your food and a unique set of buffs for your equipment, it would have involved a little more variety in the player's play style, right? Oh, I'm going to reach for the food buff because I want to have movement speed, and I'm going to reach for the clothing buff that does whatever, protects me. Anyways, just a silly example, one that I didn't think about, but a way that you could have had the players, again, just play with more variety, because I felt like the more I played the game, the less variety I actually employed. Some of my food buffs and some of my clothing buffs just kind of sat there going unused. And that's it. With that, my newest favorite game done, we are at the end of the list and the end of the video. So what I would like to ask you is, if these are your favorite games, what do you agree with and what do you disagree with? If these are not your favorite games, what can you criticize about the games? And also, by all means, talk about your favorite games that I have not mentioned in the video. First of all, I would like to see just what games you all enjoy. And second of all, I probably know of the games, maybe you've even played them. I would like to hear your honest criticisms about those games. Maybe they're also going to be frivolous, like a lot of mine were, or maybe you're going to have serious criticisms of some of your games, but for whatever reason, they're still your most cherished games. So that's it. Thank you everybody for watching. Maybe there will be a follow-up to this video where I do the best things about the games that I hate. Maybe there won't be. The title of this video might indicate that. If it's nitpicking my favorite games, there's probably not going to be a follow-up. Anyways, we'll see about that later. So again, thank you everybody for watching, and I will see you in the next video, whatever comes next.